Hello, hope you're doing well, welcome back. Made quite an impromptu decision to film this video today, and it was prompted by the fact that one of my old videos popped up on my YouTube homepage, and I clicked on it, which is never a good idea. Honestly, whoever you are, watching yourself back is just the worst thing in the world sometimes, isn't it? But I watched this video I made based on a blog post I wrote, probably end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and that blog post was called The Turtle of Overexertion. And to this day, that blog post is still one of the most read posts on my blog. And I had the thought of converting it into video format because I know a lot of people prefer to take in information in a video format rather than reading a blog post. But that was my first attempt at kind of converting it in that way, and I watched the video and I was repulsed. So today I decided to do a do-over of that video and share that blog post about the Turtle of Overexertion and hopefully try and do it a little bit better than I did it back then. There will be the blog post link below if you would prefer to read it that way, but let's just do it, and I'm going to try not to make myself cringe too much. I've got my laptop here, so if you see me looking down, you know what I'm doing. As you may know, I'm a chronically fatigued human being. I've lived with a debilitating long-term illness since I was a teenager, and the early years of living with my condition were incredibly tough. However, even with all of the struggle and suffering that I still have to manage today, I know I'm one of the lucky ones. My health has slowly and gradually improved over the last few years, and my quality of life today is now a million miles away from what it once was. Through careful adjustments, I'm now able to work part-time from home, something that I've built up slowly in line with the improvements in my physical health. And although there are many invisible challenges that come with this, the transformative effect it's had on my illness experience is very clear to see. The problem, however, is that as my capabilities have expanded, so have my ambitions. And when, after so many years of waiting, you finally have your goals somewhat within your reach, it can be extraordinarily difficult to pace yourself and be realistic about what you're capable of. Now, my best friend Izzy and I were having a good old natter about this one day. The conversation had been provoked by me, as usual, saying yes to yet another commitment and taking on more than I could realistically handle, and then ending up confined to bed in a frazzled state of overwhelm as a result. And if you're a chronically ill person reading this, / listening to this, I'm sure you know this particular feeling well. That feeling of dread as you realise that you're somewhat out of your depth and you have no choice but to try and keep afloat while minimising the consequences of your actions. Now, one thing you should know about Izzy is that she's seen more of my unfiltered illness journey than anybody else in my life. Another thing you should know is that she's prone to coming out with pure metaphorical wisdom at the most unexpected moments. Pippa, she said one day, midway through her cereal bar, "You're gonna end up like a turtle of overexertion." I waited. The gal was going somewhere with this. It's like if you were walking along through life wearing an empty backpack, and every time you picked up a new commitment or said yes to something, you added it to your bag. And because you're able to keep on walking forward and you can't yet feel the weight of it, you decide that it's going to be fine if you pick up just one more thing and pop that in your backpack too. But if you keep on adding one more thing after another the way you have been, without taking anything out, there may well come a day where the backpack suddenly gets way too heavy, and then it'll tip you backwards, you'll fall, and you might not have enough energy to get up again. So there you'll be, splat on the floor like a turtle of overexertion. After a few minutes of astonished laughter at that detailed mental image she'd painted, it dawned on me that, as always, she was right on the money. Each of us have our own backpacks in life and our own beliefs about how we want or need to fill them. We all begin with a baseline weight that we're carrying on our backs, but as we set off walking through day-to-day life, we slowly begin to pick up more and more along the way. And thanks to the world we live in, I personally think that no matter how full our backpacks already are, we're conditioned to think they could and should be even fuller. It can be very easy to look at other people and think that they're carrying much heavier loads than ourselves. This in turn can lead us all to pick up more than we can handle, attempting to emulate this problematic idea of success that we've all internalised. The idea that overexertion is something we should be striving towards, rather than something we should avoid at any cost. These days, we're often expected to be all of the things, all of the time, regardless of the toll it takes on our own well-being. In working age people in particular, it can sometimes even seem like a competition over who's dealing with the most, whose backpack is the heaviest to bear. As a result of these beliefs, our own loads quickly begin to double in weight, becoming even more cumbersome to carry. And even when that's the case, many of us are still trying to cram even more stuff into the space we have left. No matter how heavy our backpacks become as the inevitable challenges of life arise, it can seem as though we have no choice but to keep on walking forwards if we want to keep up with everybody else. When my health first began to improve, simply metaphorically wearing an empty backpack was enough for me. There was a point where even the material of it against my skin would have been too much to bear. But it wasn't long before I tentatively began to pick up my first items and pop them on my back. First my charity fundraising, and then my blog, which at the time was just a little hobby to explore my love of writing. These things caused the weight of my backpack to change for the first time, but only very slightly. As long as I was careful, metaphorically walking with the weight on my back felt pretty much doable. When opportunity knocked, however, it took a slightly more considered decision to add the weight of an internship, my first proper job since becoming ill, to my backpack. This one significantly increased the weight I was carrying, and for the first time, I felt my knees begin to buckle. However, the extra load did get easier to bear with time, even when that internship evolved into a permanent and longer-term role. Struggling to get my words out a bit today, I hope this is coming out okay. So around now, you might think that my backpack was plentiful enough. It might not have been as full to the brim as a non-chronically ill person's might have been, but I was carrying more than I ever thought I'd be able to, and I was still managing to take steps forward, enjoying life wherever possible, and keeping the overexertion to a minimum. That should have been more than enough. However, we're still living in a society where the way we perceive disabled people still seems conditional based on our output and how well we emulate the actions of the non-disabled public around us, even in a world that simply wasn't designed for us. And with overexertion becoming dangerously normalised in this day and age, it implies that for chronically ill people to be successful in this world, we should be carrying loads heavier than those we can safely manage. We're led to believe we should be making increasingly bigger strides forward, no matter how much our muscles cramp up in complaint. However, I can't only blame the world around me for adding one more weight than I could safely manage to my own backpack. Because when something you've always wanted is within reach, who isn't going to seize it with both hands? My blog gained traction and the writing opportunities began to materialise. Each individual engagement only added a small weight to my load at a time, but when they began accumulating, once more my knees began to buckle and the load started to pull me backwards. I began to feel completely consumed by all I'd taken upon myself, and somewhat unfathomably, I still can't say that word. Somewhat unfathomably, I could still never shake the feeling that it still wasn't enough. It was as though the more I proved myself and began to achieve, the higher my expectations rose and the more critical of myself that I became. And when this began to infringe on my condition management, such as being too anxious to fall asleep more often than not, I knew it was time to reevaluate what on earth I was doing. So when any of us reach this point, I suppose the obvious solution would be to just take something out of the backpack, making it easier and less cumbersome to carry. But when you've worked so hard and waited so patiently to fill your backpack with the things you love and which give you purpose, it's much easier said than done to let something go intentionally. Often, the time we should be spending thinking how to lighten the load we're carrying is actually spent thinking how we can cram even more things into that increasingly confined space. And even I can see that that's a problem. I don't mind telling you that my backpack has been full to the brim recently, and I've been struggling to bear the weight of it. I've been working way beyond my means, feeling the threat of burnout, and frequently struggling with feelings of overwhelm. And I know firsthand that even when we're all doing the best we can with what we have, it can still feel as though we're not enough. But if one day the weight of the backpack were to win, and you were to end up stuck on the floor and unable to jump back onto your feet, would you live to resent the decisions you made? The consequences of chronic overexertion are not to be messed with, and if we're not careful, there could well be a situation where even an empty backpack touching your own body would be too much to bear as well. Sometimes it takes the threat of a situation like this to approach things more mindfully. So instead of constantly trying to increase our capacity, perhaps we should learn to focus on prioritising what makes it into our backpack and learning to turn our heads at the other stuff instead. As for what's already part of your current load, perhaps we can learn to arrange these things more harmoniously, making them a slightly less hefty weight to carry. Maybe a big part of the entire process is simply recognising that regardless of how you perceive those around you, your best is plenty good enough. I suppose my take-home point here is that we all have different capabilities and different circumstances, and this isn't always reflected in the loads we're carrying. We shouldn't be adhering to this one-size-fits-all approach to productivity. Really, I reckon we should be focusing on our individual situations and ensuring we're keeping ourselves safe and healthy, rather than putting pressure on ourselves and striving for overexertion to try and be what society deems as enough. As for me, I'm slowly learning how to streamline what I want from life and how all the different components of my backpack could combine to work together, without the need for constantly taking on all of these additional loads. I still have a very long way to go, but I'm getting there, and it's all about the baby steps. I know that that's much easier said than done, but most of the time it's not impossible. And for goodness sake, may this also be the time that we all learn that resting up and taking care of ourselves is an equally significant part of the process. Messing with your health is a very risky game, and take it from me, the consequences just aren't worth it. And if that realisation is the alternative to ending up splat on the floor like the turtle of overexertion that my best friend conjured up so vividly, then personally, I think the time has come to act on it. I don't want to compromise on any of my ambitions, but I am striving to take much better care of myself in the process. And I reckon that's a goal that everybody carrying their own loads in this day and age could benefit from keeping in mind too. So here's to a new beginning, I suppose. Rather than only championing our achievements, let's champion the efforts we make to look after ourselves as well. Your worth as a human being is not defined by whatever weight you're carrying in your backpack. You are enough, exactly as you are. I don't know why doing this makes me cringe so much. Anyway, that was The Turtle of Overexertion, a blog post from a good few years ago, but still very much holds true, especially now I've sat and read it back. I've definitely made progress since the time I've written it, but it's something that I've always found difficult, and like I said, overexertion is not a nice thing, and we should definitely be avoiding it, especially when we have such limited energy to start with. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now. If you have any of your own experiences in this area, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. If there are any other blog posts that you think could work in this kind of format, I'd love to hear them. Equally, we can just pretend that this never happened. But regardless, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. You can subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.